All right, we're back, and we're joined again by my esteemed friend and fellow scholar of all things. As we've said in a previous episode, he is esoteric and I am strange. Elliot,
hmm
welcome back for an Advent slash Christmastide episode. We'll see when this actually drops. It will be during probably the liturgical season of Christmas, as is fitting and correct for an episode focusing on Sir Gawain and the Grene Knicht, or Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in modern English. Um, we will get all into this is very woo, and we will be woo together, and we will woo ourselves into a state of enchantment. Elliot, I hope you've been having a good Advent time, pre-Christmas time. Hopefully things are, I know you've been busy, but hopefully things are well.
Things are well,
That's
and continuing to be good as well, even
that's
even in
good.
addition.
That is good. Yeah. Things are busy for me, but are pretty good. So I'm thankful for that. I hope everyone watching has been having a good Advent time, and I hope you have a very, very nice Christmas. Try to do something nice for yourself and nice for others. I think that's kind of what they mostly for others first, and then also for yourself. I think that's kind of the spirit of the season. Um, I was trying to think of doing a Christmas episode, and I know that last year Elliot and I did a Festivus episode, and this might drop on Festivus. We'll see. I think the Festivus thing can stand as by itself. I think it was a fun thing, and I do think Festivus is a fun holiday, whatever you want to call it. But I want to do something a little bit more substantial this year, and I know we had talked about Sir Gawain, not with Elliot before, but with Clark before. But I kind of wanted to revisit this text. It's a really fun um piece of medieval literature. It is Arthurian, but it is not a kind of it is a pretty distinctly English. Well, we'll get into that. It's a British, let's say, take, a British Isles take on the Arthur, on sort of the Arthur mythos. Um, and it is just chock full of woo slash esoteric slash Christian symbolism, and it kind of in a beautifully medieval way, it just crams them all together, not crams, but like blends them really seamlessly together. And so I thought Elliot would be the perfect person to bring on to talk about this because, again, when I think of woo, I think of you. Uh,
How sweet.
so yeah. Well, so you had not done the Gawain before, right?
No, no, I was totally unfamiliar with this, and more generally, I didn't even necessarily realize that there were like additional Arthurian legends out there, right? Like I was
There's
under the
lots.
impression that the Arthur legend was kind of the one thing, and maybe it was a conglomeration of different things, and it's kind of nice to see another one in the ACU, right?
Yeah, no, it is. It's a whole universe. I am not an expert on High Middle Ages. I have a weird split emphasis because I am just ADD. I either do really early medieval stuff, which we've never really talked about on the show. We've never really
Mm.
talked about like one of my major areas, things that I've actually published on. We should probably do that if you're game.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that sounds
at
good.
some point, maybe in the new year. But so I either do early medieval stuff, or I do like early modern stuff. And we have talked about that. Our Wutherin episode has gotten a lot of views.
It
And
was
I'm certain
wild.
we'll
What's
see.
wrong
We'll
with
see. I
people?
don't think people are really. I have to look at the analytics. I don't think they're watching through. They're probably like, "Who are these retards?" But you know what? I'll take it. We are the retard. It's fine. We own our retardedness, and we wave our autist flag proudly, and we have our Autist Pride Month, which is every month out of the year. Um, but so we've done the early modern stuff, a little bit of that, but not a ton of medieval stuff. I think when this channel first started, I did more of that, but I think it then we just kind of I was interested in AI and
hmm
accelerationism and things like that. So it's cool to come back. I will say, as somebody who's not an expert in High Middle Ages, though, but who has, I hang out with people who are like that. I've been to conferences. Um, Yeah, the expanded Arthurian Camelot universe thing is a real was a real deal. So this idea of larger universes, people contributing, multiple authors contributing to one story, more or less, is not new. It's as old as time. You get Arthurian legends from all around, mostly Western Europe, and that means in different languages too. So Sir Gawain, Anthacrene Knecht, as it's called in Middle English, is written in Middle English, so like sort of roughly 1200s through 1500s, depending on who you talk to, 1600s, the form of the variety of English that was spoken then. And those are really a plural varieties of English. This is a Northwest Midlands dialect, which was spoken right actually near the border with Wales. And so this story has a lot of Welsh influence. We won't really get into that today, but I just thought I would point that out that yeah, this story is riffing on material from Wales and incorporating it into its own English version. So there's a lot of cool like people. Basically, the point I'm trying to say is people were exchanging Arthurian stories, doing their own version of Arthurian stories. All like it was a very popular mythos. Um, and unlike Marvel, and I'm going to piss off a whole bunch of people here, unlike Marvel, it wasn't crap. The original Marvel comics are great, but these movies are crap. So, unlike that, the continual riffing, I think, in the Arthurian legends made it better and made it cooler, and it was expansive in a way that was not gross. Um, but yeah, Elliot, you get like obviously you get English, you get French, but also you get German. There's a lot of German, like middle high German, usually in poetic form, narrative poems of like Percival, Parsifal, and like various members of the Round Table. So like it was like large parts of Western Europe had their own Arthurian version and their own take on it. So this is just the Northwest Midlands um English version of it. And I will say, as somebody who raised my hand, I don't know about you, Elliot, but as somebody who has actually ancestry in that part of England, I go woot woot. And I do really think that this was it's difficult at some point, to know exactly when my family was in that moved or was first settled in that part of England. They were probably there for a while. And so I like to think of this as an ancestral dialect. And that's a super egotistical thing to think about. But when I read this in the original, I'm like, this is like what we used to speak. Um, anywho. Uh, so um, I think what we had said is the best way to crack this because this is a long, it's a long poem. It's a relatively long poem. It's not short. It's a narrative poem. Lots of stuff going on. But I think what we'll focus on is just the woo parts, the esoteric symbolism parts, because there's a lot going on here. And so to put you on the spot as I like to do, Elliot, I'm just gonna say what parts of the poem jumped out most to you, and like I'll let you pick and choose what you want to talk about because there's just a lot going on here.
No, no. Well, it's kind of funny, right? Because you initially approached me with this poem partly in your relentless attempt, and valiant attempt, in trying to
An Arthurian
enculture
attempt. Yes.
an Arthurian, a legendary attempt to
Oh, and
attempt
sorry,
to
sorry. This
go
is your
ahead.
brain. Sorry, this is your brain on ADD. Why now? This story is set on two. It's set on two Christmases. Christmas of one year and 12 months later on Christmas. So, and it is a ghost story, and it's this classic English tradition of telling ghost stories on Christmas. That Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is maybe the original English ghost story for Christmas. So that's kind of also why. But yeah, I had to poke you though quite a bit. I
Oh no,
had
for sure.
I had to ride into Camelot and challenge you in order to get you to do this. You have not cut
It's
my head
really
off
true.
yet, though. But if you do, I will continue talking through it. So you can never.
Well, no, no, no. I mean, probably because I'm not green with envy, you know. So.
Hmm. Very nice. Touche, sir. Touche. I was
Make
trying to, get the layups to get it ready for you just to do something with it. Yeah.
something like that. Well, because it's kind of funny, right? So, I mean, when we talk about like woo and occult and esoteric stuff like that, um, myself, there's always there's two sort of things, right? There is the obnoxious English teacher for whom everything is sex, right? And it's like, no, dude, I swear it's blue curtains, it's not sex or whatever. You know what I mean? You get the drift there. And then
Yeah.
there's the obnoxious hippie for which everything is ancient aliens, and you're like, no, dude, not everything is ancient aliens, right? So there's a fine line to be drawn. But like in this case, it's like, nah, bruh, this is the author knew what they were doing, right? Like this isn't like some sort of like me reading shit into it. Like when it's Assassin's Creed glowing this brightly, it's like, nah, this is my people at work, right?
That's brilliant.
Like,
Assassin's Creed glowing. I'm going to use that from now on. I'm just taking that. That is just mine now.
feel free, because
My people, the Christians, just co-opt everyone's shit and make it ours. It's like the Toyota-thon versus Honda Days memes. Have you seen those at all? Like
yeah, 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 yeah.
Toyota-thon will now celebrate the birth of Christ. Yes, like
And to be
unironically,
clear, like
yes.
to be clear, everybody is stolen from everybody, right? But like pre-Christian, pre-Islam, like basically monotheists, right? Everybody else is sort of being not complete dicks about it, right? Like, they're like, oh, I was like, they'll give each other nods. They'll like, it's like authors that are like, this is they're making little cameos. They're not being Disney pretending that they invented every fairy tale in the entire known universe, like, tabula rasa, ex nihilo, right? But everybody's stolen from everybody since forever, right? And the pentagram is one symbol that comes up, right? And if you're
let's introduce the symbol just in the context of the poem.
yeah,
Uh,
go ahead.
okay, if I can, yeah. So, and there's
Yep,
no,
yep.
we're not, we're actually just focusing more on the symbolism here. The woo, we're not gonna spoil. There's no big. Well, I'll try my best.
This
I'll
is
say
really near the beginning.
it's really near the beginning. If there's any major spoilers, I'll say it, but I don't think we're even gonna get to that because it's just so. I actually kind of had forgotten how woo this poem is. Um,
Yeah, it's fucking
so
nuts.
so the Green Knight is this enigmatic, mysterious figure. It's really hard to know who the Green Knight is. We may have some time to even get to that today, but probably not because a lot of people have written dissertations and books on who he's really supposed to be. So, Christmas time, Camelot, 'tis a silly place. And the knights are feasting.
Well, they
Hurrah!
begin in a silly place, right?
They begin in a silly place. The knights are feasting as you do, right? Advent is over. Now it's Christmas. Christus natus est. Laudate Deum and all those things. It's great time. And so it was traditional if you were nobility, right, to play games. And then if the common folk would have played some other games, they wouldn't be so fantastic or big. But playing games with people, putting on plays during Christmas time, this is all very traditional, broadly speaking, European, but specifically English traditions, right? And this continues, right? This continues on. I mean, I don't know if you do this, Elliott. I know that your family lives in other places, and many Americans have sort of people who live all over the country or the world. But playing games on Christmas, like whether it's
Yeah.
like
Card games, board
card
games,
games,
whole nine yards.
gaming on Christmas is a thing that's really it's a long tradition. So Arthur and Knights, Sir Gawain, or sorry, Sir Gawain. I'm gonna say it in Middle English. It just sounds better. Sir Gawain. They're sort of challenging each other to various like kind of dumb but fun feats. Um, a enigmatic green knight who's like literally green, walks in and rides in and is like, "Hey, I'm gonna challenge you to a game." And it's like if you hit me first, and I'll hit you back just as hard. And so Sir Gawain's like, well, I'm gonna hit you to the point where you can't hit me back. So he cuts his head off. So there's a little bit of spoilers there. But it is the setup, right?
And so Sir Gawain does this to the Green Knight.
To the Green Knight. And then the Green
Okay,
Knight
this was unclear to me.
picks up his head, and the head keeps talking. He's like, great. So I will see you in 12 months' time, and I'll do the same to you. And rides off. And so there's this kind of like, oh shit, what the fuck have I done kind of thing. Because so here's the thing is it's not like this Green Knight. This is how I read it. I'm certain people have different interpretations. My reading is the Green Knight maybe would come after him and find him, kind of like a headless horseman thing, but I don't think so. The reason why Sir Gawain goes on this quest to find the Green Chapel where the Green Knight lives, or that the Green Knight guards, is sort of like where his place is. The reason he goes through all this is because of honor, because he agreed to do this. Also, it was not chivalrous what he did. Like he tested, if not broke the sort of the rules of chivalry, because he like essentially tried to kill a maybe not an unarmed opponent, but an opponent who wasn't fighting back. So there's a breach, and so he's like honor
it
bound
did
to.
make it. They did really belabor the point that this guy was coming in peace, peacefully, not even a
Yeah,
little bit
yep.
thing. He shows up and he's like, "Oh my God, you got an epic crib. This is a wonderful crew. You got Sir Arthur. Like, bro, let's play this game
King
in this
Arthur. It's
specification."
it's King.
Right.
It's ma'am. No, it's King. Yeah. Yeah, Sir Gawain is sort of young, impetuous in this stage of his storytelling, his story arc, right? He's very young and impetuous. He's one of the younger knights, and so he's stupid. And to bring in some tarot image, there's a fool quality to him, right? Like he is
Mm-hmm.
stepping off and doing this dumb thing. And it's a ledge, and the ledge is okay. So you thought you were going to kill this guy. Turns out he can't be killed like that. And now 12 months later, so before the next Christmas, right? Um, you have to go and find him and uphold your end of the game, right? So this is a game, but it's not like the fun. It was all fun and games up until the point you cut off the Green Knight's head, and then it's no longer a game. So I think that's why it's really has to do with honor and needing to fulfill that. Because if Sir Gawain doesn't follow through, then he is. I mean, his breach of chivalry will be complete, right? Like the rules will be completely broken. Um, so, I mean, it's not like the Green Knight stopped him from cutting his head off. True, right? But it, obviously the Green Knight knew that he couldn't be killed that way. So it's just like there's kind of cool games within games happening there. And again, we could talk ad nauseum about that, but we don't like nausea, so let's avoid that. That's the general setup. So he has to go on this big quest, right? He has to go on this quest to find the Green Chapel and to deal with the Green Knight, and maybe we can come back to that for like a second part episode, because he's getting all set up and ready to go. And there's these cool descriptions. There's actually really cool asides in this poem, and this is pretty common for medieval, let's say pre-modern, um, even early modern storytelling, where you get these like kind of cool, like not what we would think of as a non sequitur. But if you're anyone who like me or Elliott who has ADD, you appreciate these non sequiturs. They're very common in any storytelling before maybe 100 years ago, or maybe 150, to just have random asides. Um, because in some ways, those little random asides are the best parts of the stories. I usually find, my opinion. Um, you get cool. There's a really cool hunting description. The hunt. I don't know if you got to that part, Elliot. The hunting. There's a whole like long description of hunting. Um, Sort of like a whole hunt scene where like
Is
dogs
that
are
before he gets to the Green Knight guy?
before hounds are chasing boars around and stuff. It's really beautiful, particularly if you okay, nerd hat. If you read it, if you hear it spoken, read aloud in the original, it's really cool. You don't even I'm not a hunter, but I do like the outdoors. And it is I do like dogs. This cool description of a boar hunt. There's all these like cool little bits. One of the cool bits earlier, and this is the part that I think that you got to as well, Elliot, is the description of Gawain's cool armor, special stuff, right? It is it's like the army. If anyone's watched like any of the Sam Raimi Evil Dead movies, it's like the vroom, groovy, like he put the chainsaw hand on and all like whoop, like look at what he's got, all these cool things. The hero has all the cool things, right? It's like to bring it back to Marvel, right? It's like Iron Man is gonna suiting up, and oh look at this, he's got the cool new rocket launcher shit, right? Like we still do this in our modern storytelling all the time. Um, it is the Neo I know kung fu show me scene, right? Like it's the look at me, I'm training montage, I'm getting ready for the big quest. Uh, and so he has some cool stuff, including a shield. In the shield, I knew this was going to make Elliot very, very happy. The
Mm-hmm.
shield has a pentangel, is what it's called in the Middle English. Um, you could say pentagram, but pentagram has a very negative connotation in modern American sort of woo. Not the
So
name,
here's
not
what's
not not the name itself, but like in the, you know what I'm saying, like in the popular
well,
conscious.
so
If you hear
it,
pentagram, you're like somebody's doing demon something here,
well, no, that's
and
very,
and
very
that is
interesting, right?
and that is
Because
decidedly, sorry, that is decidedly not. I just want to make this point. That's not what
right,
Gawain
right,
is
right.
doing. That is not. This is a different use of that symbol. And so this is something that, is kind, if you're raised on American horror films, which are great, right? I love those. You're going to get you're like, whoa, what's going on? That's not what he's not. There's nothing diabolical happening here. He has a shield it's a pretty amazing shield. It has a pentangle. I'm going to use the original word just so that we don't get, because it'll just, the pentagram has its, is, for better or for worse, that word is color coded. Um, Pentacle on one side and like the Virgin Mary's face on the other side, on the inside, which is, which I'll get to. So I guess maybe the best way to do this, Elliot, is to let you talk about the pentacle from your tradition, and I'll talk about the Mary's head on the other side, because
Yes.
it is a
Yeah, yeah.
fascinating, is a literally two-sided kind of shield thing. But yeah, so what did you make of that whole thing? Because there's, the poem talks a lot about five, the importance of the letter. Man, it is the end of the semester and I am tired. The number five, and all that stuff. So I'll try to shut up, but it is exciting. So you go.
No, no,
Talk
it
about,
is
what
very
did you make of this pentangle thing?
before I go to that, but while you still remember it, you
Mhm.
brought up Iron Man, right?
Yeah.
And a little bit steeringly, rightfully so, Iron Man. I will point out that Iron Man's able to produce fire from all of the points of the wounds of Jesus. Just as a fun fact, there, you
Oh,
literally
wait.
can't get away from it.
Well, okay. I guess
Well, I know this is jumping
his
ahead,
chest
but
is
I
like
don't.
this. So are you substituting his chest bit for this side, for the spear in the side?
Yes, yes, exactly, right?
Okay.
Because
If you make that
a
change,
bit in
I'll
the
buy it.
torso.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, torso. But
Right, 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 right.
it's not under the ribs, but fine. Yeah, the autist in me is like, technically,
Oh,
yes. I hear what you're saying.
is that under his ribs or is it literally embedded in his ribs? Like it's literally under his ribs, right? Like I mean, I guess underneath, but you see what I mean. Anyway,
I hear what
regardless,
you're saying. I hear what you're
it's a
saying.
slight
Yes.
stretch, right? Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's a,
yeah.
no, but it
But
actually works. I hadn't really thought of that. I'm certain somebody's done an well breakdown on that. That's a good point. Yeah. So I
no,
mean,
no, but I mean, just to kind of like the point being is that some of the symbolism, right, is just like okay, so
well,
as a
it's in a Jonathan Pajot way. It's a universalist kind of storytelling thing, right? Like not cringe universalist, but like like the
mhm,
story is
yeah,
universal. Of like this hero and like who goes on these, who does these things. Five pops up in weird places all over. Yeah, there. This is set, as we were talking about before we recorded. Sir Gawain, this story, this poem is tapping into something really old,
right,
much
right.
older. That it's from the 1300s, much older than the 1300s, right? Like we think this
Because,
is old, and it is old for us, but it's actually kind of relatively modern in the grand scope of
mhm,
things. So
mhm.
yeah. Anyhow, keep
No,
going.
for sure. I have to quick apology here because as soon as in the old sense, not in the I'm sorry
An
sense,
apologia.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, an apologia, right? Because I always check myself as like a person who like lightly studies the occult and all that stuff, right? Where it's like, okay, are you just sort of hippie shoehorning this into everything, right? But like, there's a certain sense in which the Kabbalistic take on some of these things like it was interesting reading this poem because there's always the temptation of presentism whenever you're reading a historical document of
Yeah.
trying to superimpose your symbology and meanings on the past, but in this case it's extremely likely that the symbology that I use, right, in a systematized way was codified and sort of observed in this poem and poems like it, right? So, when they come over and hit us over the head with and by the way, right, I love how it's called pentangle, right? There's a certain sense in which English words define themselves if you stop pronouncing them in a modern way, right?
Yeah.
So it's called the pentacle, right? In modern sort of tarot and occultism, right, which is a five-pointed star. Usually, oftentimes nowadays, people would think about a pentacle as being a coin with a pentagram in it. but the pentagram only means five, like, shape, more or less, right? Like
Right.
you can think about the pentagram being like how to trace out a star pattern, right? Is all it is, the edges of a star. But with it being a pentacle, right? Tangle, literally, and they talk about the knotness in the story, right? But and they explicitly say, hey, all of these virtues are knitted together like the pentacle, right? Beautiful symbology, because one of the symbols of the Christian Trinity is the, if I can say, tritangle, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, in a way, yeah,
right. So
yeah.
so this is sort of a
Well, and so
anytime.
so sorry. One of my favorite saints, right? Saint Patrick. This is his famously is how he described a useful way of explaining the Trinity to the pagan Irish Celts that he was trying to working to convert is like Shamrock, right? Like you get three, uh three leaves coming together, right? So even I mean that's just an example of maybe a tritangle. It's not really a tritangle, but you know what I mean, like something like that in nature.
Well, there's that classic, like, Trinitarian Celtic knot that you see all over the
Yeah,
place,
you get
right?
the
Like,
Celtic knot, yeah,
as
everywhere. Yeah,
right, because you cut one, it doesn't become a knot anymore. It's one curve, blah blah blah. All these
right.
things. Actually,
Yep.
not the worst, like, symbol, but it's really interesting. And this isn't just like a sort of weird situation. It's like, no, I think actually there's some thing here, because God is more simple, right? So, firstly, I don't think you can actually have a tangle with fewer points, right?
No,
So
no, no, not sorry, not a tangle, an angle.
no, I mean, like, a tangle. So in terms of, like, the knot, because this knot is topologically different than a circle, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's you can't just get it through through just sort of, quote unquote, twisting the circle up, right? Like, it actually has to be cut and, like, re-sewn to tangle itself in this way, right? So to speak. So I think that the Trinity, and this is just me talking off the top of my head, is the simplest such example of this tangle type thing. If you look at it, knot theory, it's a knot, right? It's a
Yes,
mathematical knot,
but knots are
and
not
so,
tangles. That's my thing. And I think
oh
part of
no,
it too. So part of it too is because this is not originally an English word, and so we in terms even you can tell that even Middle English the syllabification is because the way English our language organizes sounds, we pronounce it pentangle, pentagle, where the syllable ends at pen, but actually the syllable technically, right, ends at the T. So it's a pent five, right?
angle. I
Angle.
see, I see, I see,
Yeah.
I see.
So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
you're
want to
right, you're right.
kabbalistically in the moment say riff on the whole tangle part, that's fine. But just know that originally it
I
would
see
not.
what you're saying.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah,
not a
yeah. No, you're right.
pentangle. It's a
Well,
pent
and
angle.
technically, I know this too, right? Because penta,
Okay,
right?
I
Like,
just was
so, but
wanting to
yes,
make sure that
yes.
was. I'm like,
No, no, no. My
it's
apologies.
like it's no, don't apologize because it's fine. But yeah, like a not. But I guess my point is
Well,
that
it didn't occur
knots.
to me that they were using Greek, right, as opposed to.
Now,
But
now
anyway, it's
whether somebody in the Middle English period would have picked up on this is like, I don't. It would depend on how much Greek they knew, right? Like, do they know
well, they
Greek?
do some wordplay, right, that makes me think that they are thinking about it as a tangle. You
But
see
you
what
can
I
do that,
mean?
right?
Like,
And you can make that
yeah,
argument.
yeah, yeah.
I'm
Right.
not
Like,
saying
now, of
I'm
course,
not
they are
even.
wrong, and I was wrong. But
This is
this is
this
why I'm
is
kind of getting there. You see what I mean? Like, it's like they literally say, "Oh, it's a never word that is a better knot." Anyway, regardless,
Yeah,
doesn't really
no, no.
matter.
I
Like,
we are. This is so much autism right here. But I guess I'm just saying. I'm not even saying that the author, who's unknown by the way, like, he's called the Pearl Poet because he's his other. It's very likely that he wrote the other poem that he wrote was called Pearl, which is a religious poem in and of
oh,
itself about Christ,
mm,
and Mary and that
mhm.
kind of stuff. So that'd be fun to do at a later date. But I maybe the Pearl Poet, the Gawain poet, maybe he was playing with the tangle bit, maybe he wasn't. I think it's just like because a knot, because so maybe I'll read this section. How about that? Because this is just we're
Yeah, go
talking
ahead, go
to
ahead.
each other. We are going to get comments about everyone talks over each other. Um, all right, so I'm reading from the Tolkien translation because it's my favorite translation, but you can read, there's lots of good ones out there. By the Baldric, sorry. So Gawain is like suiting up. I'm just gonna read this section, okay? Because it's gonna
Mhm.
make more sense if I've read it. So
100%. Yeah.
sorry, it is a little bit of a live reading. Apologies. Then Then they brought
This is
him
why
his,
we're weird, right? We only somewhat live
yeah,
read.
yeah, only somewhat. But we do not shill because we do not make money on this. We don't want to. Um, then they brought him his blazon that was of brilliant gules, with the pentacle depicted in a pure hue of gold. By the baldric he caught it, and about his neck cast it. Right well and worthily it went with the knight. And why the pentacle, or pentacle, however you want to pronounce it, is proper to that prince so noble, I intend to tell you now to tell you, though it may tarry my story. So even here, there's a little bit of a, by the way, this is going to take a bit. It is a sign that Solomon once set on a time to betoken troth, as it is entitled to do. For it is a figure that in its 5 points holdeth, and each line overlaps and is linked with another. And in every way it is endless. And the English I hear everywhere name it the endless knot. Proper noun there. So it suits well this knight and his unsullied arms, for ever faithful in 5 points, and 5 times under each. Gawain as good was acknowledged, and his gold refined, devoid of every vice, and with virtues there adorned. So there the pentacle painted new, he on his shield and coat did wear, and I believe, sorry, as one of word most true, and knight of bearing fair. So that's Tolkien's wonderful translation. He's kept the alliteration, which is cool. So yeah,
So I could be like given the reading there.
yeah,
I'm reasonably forgiven for making the sort of kabbalistic poetic leap because they're thinking about this like a freaking knot, right? And so
yeah, they
you
are.
know all the now of course linguistically of course we're correct. So this is interesting, right? Because firstly the circlet that's put on his head, right, is made out of diamonds, right? And this was a huge, like, holy shit moment because in the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, the crown chakra, or the not the chakra, but actually also the crown chakra, a little bit, not quite the same, but the crown Sephiroth, right, the highest point on the Tree of Life, is supposed to represent the point above the head, right? And it's also white, right? So the fact that the circlet that we're putting on his head is made out of diamonds, right, is interesting, right? I'll just say that. And then his shield, being worn on the left hand, I think, right?
Yep, yeah.
Generally, yep.
Statistically speaking, yes, yeah, yeah,
Being red lines up very beautifully with the Kabbalistic Tree of Life Sephiroth that's colored red, right? Which is the martial kind of stands in for Mars, right? And so it's interesting that it's red as well. Now, of course, I'm claiming that the Kabbalists would have gotten this from poems like this, right? Not the other way around, obviously, right? So it's just to super duper clarify. And then the pentacle, right? The pentacle being on his shield, his red shield with his Rothschild, by the way, would have been a protective amulet type of situation. So the pentagram slash pentacle has been a sign of protection against
yeah.
demons
Against
since the
demons, yeah,
Greeks, since the
yeah,
ancient Greeks. It's
yeah.
super freaking old.
My understanding too is that now I'm not an expert in ancient Greek religion, but I do
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not an expert in the sense of like I don't have a PhD in it, but I
Mm-hmm.
I probably know more about it than like your average person, highly educated non-expert, something like that. My understanding is you see pentacle type emblems, insignias all over the Mediterranean
Mm-hmm.
region. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea that the theory I have read from people who know more about it than me. So if somebody is like, that's wrong, apologies. This is what I've read, is that the idea is that you could entrap a spirit basically bouncing around endlessly and keep the spirit from leaving. That you could
Hmm.
kind of control that negative force somehow, contain it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
think of like Ghost. It always comes back to Ghostbusters. The trap, right? The ghost trap. You flip it out, you entangle it, right, with the proton pack, and you trap it somehow. That this was an old way of doing that, essentially.
And that's certainly how the Middle English or Middle Europeans, right? How the
Definitely how
medieval
the
Europeans would have thought of it for sure.
yes, yeah. it is only, I like that you point out that it is not originally intended for doing anything nasty. It's actually intended for keeping nasty things away. It's only, I would
Hmm.
argue, a later left hand
Much later.
inversion of that,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that is what modern horror has taken as a thing. And so yeah, when you see a pentacle, you get this weird but it's like, well, how's it being used, right? Like,
For they will see angels as demons, is what I would say, right? Like, not saying that like
and vice
the
versa.
right, no, for sure, right? And so this is why, this is why I reckon, that the powers that be are trying to lead us away from light and truth and all this stuff. Not to say that we have to save the pinnacle or nothing like that, but like this is clearly a Christian story, right? Like in that era, and one can say, I suppose, that like Christianity died for like several thousand years or
It's
whatever,
always
but
dying and coming back. I mean, it's
right.
always dying. This is that Chesterton quote, right? About it's always dying and coming back. This is what Christianity does, because it's what Christ does.
Mhm.
You
No,
know,
exactly, right.
yeah.
And so to that end, it's sort of like, well, dude, is spiritual stuff real or not? And if it is real, is there any mechanics to it? Is there any science to it, right? And if there is or isn't, then if there is, then like some of this shit, may actually be efficacious, right? Like the notion that the sign of the cross is a protective symbol, right, or gesture, is well founded in Christian literature since forever, right? Like that's
Yep.
literally why in the movies everybody be crossing themselves when shit's roll going
Yeah.
down,
Yeah,
right?
it is only, and again, we love to disrespect Calvin on this show. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if you're Calvinist, we still love you, but
We are Calvin disrespecters.
we are Calvin disrespectors here.
Mm-hmm.
It is only the radical Reformation that sought to remove the sign of the cross from public use, from private devotions, from that was like its own. And the fact that the fact that Anglicans and Lutherans have stopped doing it is sadly just a consequence of weird
The
peace deals made
Calvinist
with,
revolution.
yeah, well, it's weird peace deals made with Calvinists. It's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I can, just to get it out of the way, the
Mm-hmm.
next sort of stanza 28 is also really, it gets
Oh,
into the explicitly Christian part of it. So I don't know. I want to read
oh,
that at some point. But I don't want to
give me,
cut you
give
off.
me, yeah, give me one last point on
One last
this one
point.
before we
Yeah,
move
yeah.
on to the rest of it, which is to say that um, it in esoteric tradition, which you can see here, this isn't something that 1700 Jews made up or weirdos Renaissance Christians made up. You could see it continuing in the 1300s, right? This is an
Yep.
extremely ancient tradition. Um, that that King Solomon was a magician. Period. End of story. Right? Because this comes from the fact that he built the temple basically in like overnight ish. I mean, it's a certain number of days. I forget how
Right.
many. I think 3 or something. Without sound of tool or hammer or cutting of stone, with no help. And so the obvious situation, right, is that he had supernatural help of some sort, right? And the usual esoteric line on that is that he was extremely powerful wizard, capable of commanding quote unquote daemons, right? Not
Right.
demons and that like they're friends of Satan, but just daemons, so, sort of spiritual entities that are think about like angels a messenger, right? So they're an
Yeah.
email, right? And the
That's
daemons
what
are
angel.
little
Yeah. Yeah.
scripts,
Yeah.
right? So yeah. So
Angels are
so
emails,
spiritual.
dude. You're blowing my mind. Okay, technically that's sort of true, I guess, in a way. Yeah, like yeah, technically.
And little daemons are little bits of computer code. That's why in Linux they call a whole bunch of stuff daemons. Anyway, regardless, next stanza.
Yeah. I wanted to make a Matt Damon joke, but I can't think of it. I'm not formulating it quickly enough. But yeah, you can fill it in. Matt Damon. All right. So
Include
stanza.
Matt Damon joke.
Yeah. Isn't it always about him? Stanza 28 is also pretty good, and so I'm gonna read it. Again, apologies, but hey, read the poem. This is a beautiful thing. So let's get some of us down here. Okay. First, so this picks up right where I after I finished last time. First faultless was he found in his five senses. and next in his 5 fingers he failed at no time. And firmly on the 5 wounds of all his faith was set, that Christ received on the cross, as the creed tells us. And wherever the brave man into battle was come, on this beyond all things was his earnest thought, that ever from the 5 joys all his valor he gained, that to heaven's courteous queen once came from her child, for which the cause the knight had in comely wise on the inner side of his shield her image depainted, that when he cast his eyes thither his courage never failed. The 5th that was used, as I find by this knight, was free giving and friendliness first before all, and chastity and chivalry, ever changeless and straight. Would say chivalry would have been pronounced probably more like chivalry, so that's the chastity, chivalry, changeless. That's the alliteration there. And piety surpassing all points. These perfect 5 were hasped upon him harder than on any man else. Now these 5 series, in sooth, were fastened on this knight, and each was knit with another and had no ending, but were fixed at 5 points that failed not at all, coincided in no line nor sundered either, nor ending in any angle anywhere, as I discover, wherever the process was put in play or passed to an end. Therefore on this his shining shield was shaped now this knot, royally with red gules upon red gold set. This is the pure pentacle or pentangle, as people of learning have taught. Now Gawain in brave array his lance at last hath caught. He gave them all good day for evermore as he thought. So he's getting ready to leave, and so that he's leaving. So that's so from the text there. So in the second, or in stanza 28, at least in the Tolkien translation, it's sort of the stanzas are numbered. We get really more explicitly not just Solomonic references, so not just sort of quasi Old Testament. It's not in the Old Testament per se that Solomon did this, but it's part of tradition. It's part of sort of a Abrahamic tradition, right? You find in Abrahamic faiths, you find this sort of this tradition coexisting alongside whatever version of scripture that faith would have, that you that Solomon is involved in doing woo things. Now we get like explicitly Christian take on it. So I'm curious what your impression of that whole thing was, because I got a lot to say, but I'm trying to give space to you first, because
No, for sure. Well, and I am interested in how you're interpreting the Mary situation, and I'll
Mhm.
slightly break down some of the things I certainly didn't know. Right? I mean, obviously, the 5 senses is seeing, hearing, smelling, taste, and touch. Right?
Right.
Um, the 5 fingers, pinky ring, middle, index, thumb. Although I'm sure there's some sort of esoteric meaning there that I'm missing, but it doesn't really matter. The 5 wounds being the, as we already briefly talked about, the canonical quote unquote wounds of Christ, right? Which is left hand, right hand, left and right foot, and then, under the ribs slash
Yep.
torso, right?
Yep.
Sometimes there's candles done around Easter, for this sort of thing. If you go to a high church, the 5 joys of Mary, right, the Queen of Heaven, the courteous Queen of Heaven, right, are Annunciation, Visitation, the birth of Jesus, presentation of Jesus at the temple, and finding Jesus in the temple. These are like points of happiness that Mary had experienced
I've
in raising Jesus.
there's also another. I was looking through this. Apparently, it's sort of there's also another take on the 5 joys. Annunciation, nativity, resurrection, ascension, assumption, is what I've read too.
I
But that's
see.
just
Okay.
so
Yep.
there's
Yep.
the 5 joys of Mary. I think that these are not mutually exclusive, right? Like there's
No,
it's
for sure.
like, yeah, those are all joys of Mary. They're ways of organizing the joys of Mary into 5, right?
Well,
And
and
yeah,
I would have to really research this a little bit deeper to know like which one at this moment people might have thought about it, right? But it doesn't really matter at the end of
and
the
I'm
day,
not an
right?
expert on that either. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Neither one of us are experts on that. I had to look this up like basically right beforehand type of thing. But essentially, like, yeah, there's 5 joys of Mary, right? And then the 5 virtues, right? Which in the translation that I had, right, were frankness, fellowship, purity, courtesy, and compassion. Um, so maybe Colin, you've got thoughts on the
Yeah,
specifics of those
courtesy
ones.
meant something different for in the chiv and for knights, right? Courtesy was not just like, oh, after you, right? Or please and thank
Right.
you were the magic words. It's like, speaking of magic words, that's how modern English speakers define courtesy, because we do not live in a chivalric age. um I that's not a good thing either. That's sadly we do not live in a chivalric age. Chivalry's been dead for a lot long. Chivalry does not mean just holding the door open for elderly people and women. It means something much more.
If you
The
want to hear about the death of chivalry, read Don Quixote
Quixote, yeah.
because we
Um,
are English today.
yeah, Quixote, yeah. No, the courtesy, yeah, courtesy in Middle English really was like this all-encompassing code of honor. Not coat, code, yeah, code of honor, like how you as a knight were supposed to. Now, it doesn't mean you did it that way. There are a lot of many bad knights, yeah, as you read about in these stories, and in more sort of modern histories. But
Yeah,
it
if
was
you're a weeb, think about it more like the samurai code, right? Like
yeah,
I
it
feel
is
like there's a little bit less weird spookiness around that for
yeah.
Westerners than the chivalry, you know?
Courtesy was a lot more all encompassing. That and so that's just something that I would point out is like we don't mean just holding the door open, right? Of course that's part of it, but it's more about like paying honors to people that you should pay honors to and helping people that you should help. So courtesy, it's sort of the part as part of broader chivalry. It's sort of a service up and service down kind of thing. It's very much of knowing your place within the hierarchy, and paying obviously worship and honor at the highest to God, and then right obviously honoring God's mom, Virgin Mary, Theotokos, right? Obviously you get explicit Marian stuff happening here. And then it's like acknowledging your lord, which in this case for Gawain is Arthur. And then it's also like acknowledging like uh and pledging service to maybe like, and a little bit of spoiler later, to the lady of the courts or something like that, right? And then it's obviously also I'm trying to doing my best to move from top to bottom here. Then it's like how you engage with other knights, and that's something that Gawain has a little bit of a boo boo, as we've previously said in the beginning, with the way he interacts with the Green Knight. He's weird, he's otherworldly, he is still a knight. He's called a knecht, yeah. He's a knight, so it's interacting with others of your sort of knight level, and then it's also way you interact with yourself, and then it's also the way you treat people lower than you. And so it's this to really, I'm not an expert on chivalric systems, but I mean I know this much, right? Like this is all about, so this is at least that courtesy, like it's part of inhabiting an explicitly hierarchical world. And it is a shame, I think, that we
Yeah.
lost that sense of courtesy. That's completely the modern word courtesy is just like be nice, whatever that
Well,
means.
so I think there's two interesting things, right? So firstly,
Elliot, sorry, Elliot, I want to say is if you can't, if you if it costs you nothing to be courteous, okay? Just be nice. If you can't say anything, why say something mean when you could just say something nice? As we're
oh
reminded
yes, of
ad
course.
nauseum during Christmas time, you're like, what about speaking to truth and beauty and goodness? No? Okay, just be nice. Good to know.
I want a guy that doesn't take himself too seriously, is kind,
Yeah.
um, but go out with Mike or gun instead. Anyway, so point being is that it's funny because you know courtesy, as we're talking about it here, right? Um, uh, Also fits in with this word condescension that like we are very confused about in modern times
Yes.
because like we don't have anything, you literally cannot condescend properly here, so
Nope.
everything that is hierarchy respecting is condescension necessarily, kind of,
Well,
right? Because condescension is like the rightful way to interact with people, so
yes.
like it is
Yes.
correct for a lord to quote unquote condescend to
Condescend.
you by talking down to you
Yes.
because he is treating you like you're supposed to be treated, which is
Yes.
beneath him, right?
Yes.
And you are treating him like he's above you. It would be improper for you to for somebody who is of the same rank of you or lower than you to treat them like a lord of yours, right? And vice versa, right? So condescension really is a positive term
It is.
if you believe in hierarchy. It's a
It
negative
is.
term only if you're a filthy communist,
Yeah.
proto Hegelian Calvinist, right? Like,
Yes. And if you're a Christian, you should like condescension because that's how Christ saves you. It's this
correct.
is the spirit. I mean, we're almost in nativity, right? Like we're almost there. That is what the incarnation is all about, buddy. Like, yeah, yeah, God, God empties himself, God in the Son empties himself into the world, right? Like this is amazing stuff. Condescension is not a bad thing. It is not a bad thing. It is a very
So
beautiful thing.
if you believe in order, if you believe in structure and not
I,
in stupid ways, in correct ways.
yeah.
So I want everybody, if you can, either picture this or like bust out a pen or whatever, right? So draw a pentacle, right? So the pentagram or a little star, just draw a star like you normally would draw, and then draw a star on the point of each one of those stars. Because what we have done here is exactly that, right? It was said, by the poem, hey, he is perfect in 5 points, which, by the way, apparently in older times did not mean without ability to improve upon. It meant complete. I recently learned this from some sort of autistic-ish, I love the Constitution guy, right? But very interesting stuff, because, when the Constitution people are saying more perfect, they're not saying something that's ridiculous. They're saying more complete, which, is something that could be done, right?
Right.
So anyway, regardless, I don't know if that's how they would thought about it back then. By the way, I'm not claiming to whatever, but maybe that's just a food for thought, I guess, right? So he was perfect in these 5 points, which means that he was already pretty badass, right? So, and I'm really glad you actually gave that chivalric thing, because really we see that Sir Gawain is totally nailing every other piece of chivalry, right? Like he correctly interacts with his king and his court and everything else, right? It's just
Except for the boo boo with the Green Knight.
well, that's what I'm saying. Like this
Yeah.
is the one point that he is learning about is how do you properly play nice with your fellow peers, right? So this is the part where he done fucked up. But at
Well,
every
there's
other
also bits
point,
too about how you play nice with members of the fairer sex a little bit
well,
later.
fair enough,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
but the fair sex that are his equals, right, so to speak. So this really is like about finding your place amongst your co-equals, which is oftentimes much harder than people above and below you, because those rules are scripted. Oftentimes it's pretty clear, everybody's kind of helping each other, blah blah blah. But amongst your equals, it's a little bit less clear sometimes, and I think this poem is in some ways talking about that. And it says that he is perfect in these 5 ways, but he also has 5 points of perfection, which 5 times 6 is 30. 30 is a very interesting number, because this is the number that we use time, right, seconds and all that stuff, and it's what they would have used, as the Babylonians did, to have degree calculations for this, measuring the heavens, right? So
Right.
I'm not really trying to make it spookier than it has to be, but it's just all very interesting, and the numerology would not have been lost to the author, right? I'm just saying.
No, I don't think so.
um,
It's too cohesive and it's too intentional. Um,
for sure.
two
Also, I want to
stanzas,
point out,
two stanzas are spent just talking about like this.
and he even
Yeah.
explicitly says, by the way, this is an aside, wink, wink,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is literally a fourth wall break where he is like, hey, don't pay attention to this, pay attention to this. Like,
Well, fourth
so
wall breaks are really common in pre-modern, particularly narrative poems. Very common, very, very common.
absolutely. Well, because they're
Yeah,
talking to you and you're right there is the whole point,
exactly.
right? Like,
Yeah.
you're not, so the last thing before we'll move on that I thought about this particular one,
Mhm.
you could analyze each individual one of these for a long time, but I
Yeah.
won't. Is that I'll just point out as an aside that we think about there being a bunch of planets, but they didn't know about Neptune, Uranus, or Pluto, or anything like that, right? They only knew about Saturn. Saturn was the last planet. That's why Saturn, was the underworld, right? Because it was as far fucking away as you could get. And to some degrees, they would have known
Is
this
Saturn
since
connected to the
ancient
underworld?
times. Yeah, because
Okay.
Saturn is the god of time, right? And of
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
Saturn is the Roman god for Hades. You see what I mean? That's why it's
Uh,
Saturnalia, right?
okay.
Um,
Yeah, no, I guess that makes sense. The end of the year, the like
yeah,
the darkest, most death time of the year. Yeah, yeah. Death of the
I
sun, all
mean,
that stuff. Yeah.
it might have been a coincidence that it's a farthest away planet, by the way, but they were actually pretty good at astronomy back in the day, so I don't know. Anyway, point being is that you know the planets, there would have been five planets, right, which are wandering stars, right? So
Right.
Venus, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, Saturn were the canonical planets, right? The sun and the moon were different objects, right? They would not have seen the sun as a star because
No.
they were not modern cosmologists,
Right.
right? Like they could actually see the sun, and it was fucking different than the teeny weeny little pointy bits in the sky,
Yep.
right?
But Neil deGrasse
And
Tyson is going to talk about how stupid people were back then because
right.
because you know because he's Magic
It's
Spaceman and he sometimes it really do be like that and just
he's just sweeping under the rug like how it is to be embodied as a human being in reality. We need to take the objective,
uh,
anti-personal perspective, right?
sorry not sorry, but the amount of hubris in that man and it's
Mm-hmm.
just I mean I am not without my hubris, but it's incredible. It's
I mean,
so bad.
at least the previous atheists were frequently pretty impressive themselves, right? But anyway,
Exactly. I mean, if you're going to
you
be
know
an
what I mean?
atheist, at least have some, be impressive in some ways. It's just, yeah, if you're going to do it, but
If you're going to be that obnoxious about it
I know
anyway,
for
you can be
real.
atheist and not obnoxious. That's fine. Like, no
Yeah,
worries.
that's
But,
possible.
and then the last body obviously would have been Earth. But again, Earth, nobody was a flat earther at this point. Like, probably commoners didn't know anything, just like commoners don't know anything today anyway, right?
No,
Like, nothing
but Elliot,
changes.
this is the thing is that the Catholic Church never believed yeah, always believed that the earth was at the center and don't you know
Yeah.
this is how science happened is that there was always people like who were all of them Catholic by the way in the West who were all of them staunchly Catholic who were making new models of our solar system if not the universe and the church has always hated that.
Right. And
That's
and
how it happened.
Galileo was not brought up on charges for just being a general fucking douchebag at life. No, it was because
No.
of his like science and shit. It's like, no,
Yeah,
dude,
because
he
it
was like literally a
Elliot's
dick to everybody.
yeah,
Like,
science has always been
again,
at war with
nothing
religion.
changes. Scientists have always been dicks, right? They're not agreeable people. They're highly
No.
disagreeable, very object orientated, right? Not it's like, bro, the personality types remain. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like,
But you know what?
like,
But the big difference is that back then we did not let them split atoms for fun. So and the world was better for it. Anyhow.
well, we done fucked up. We caught up. We literally got caught up in thinking if we could. We never thought if we should, like straight up. But anyway,
It's
so that's the
yeah, it's an
you
Ian
know so
Malcolm moment. Yeah, for sure.
100%, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the kind of immediate take kabbalistically and numerologically, and a little bit of the real deal, like mystic heritage that I have a lot of modern kabbalistic slash occult understandings. Many of them come from ancient tradition, like the Pentacle, right? Many of them come from more modern reinterpretations of those traditions, and that's fine. Everybody has been reinterpreting everything
Oh
all the
yeah,
time. That's not
it
the end of
always
the world,
happens.
right? Like,
If a tradition, if any tradition is to survive, it must continually go back and forth in time, right?
mm-hmm,
Because a tradition that's healthy is fighting the time war, as we would say, right?
yes,
It's
yes,
continually going
yes.
back and forth in time. It is literally time traveling. It is saying, what did we
Mm-hmm,
used to believe? We still believe this, but how does that work itself out in this situation now? How do we apply this now? We go back and then we
mm-hmm,
go forward and we go
mm-hmm,
back. And if you only go back or you only go forward, these are you've stepped off the path, right? You have to find
mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm.
tensiony law and gospel anyone all those things yeah like that middle the path that that sends you in the right direction. Sorry.
Caveat: I'm not crypto Lutheran, but
No,
I
no. Well,
do
that's
actually
me.
appreciate the law
That's
and
me.
gospel. I do appreciate the law and gospel. I have a law and gospel respect. We are law and gospel respecters on this podcast.
Yes, we
We're
are.
Calvinist disrespecters.
Disrespect. If you haven't woken up today and been thankful for being alive, try to do that. If you
Mm-hmm.
haven't woken up today and try to do something nice to somebody else, try to do that. Okay, check. And if you haven't woken up today and disrespected Calvin and Hegel, then
Yes.
you're not fulfilling your duties. Like, disrespect these
Going
people.
directly to wandering humanist hell, directly to hell. Do not pass go.
No,
you,
I'm not going to condemn
you,
anybody. I'm just going to remind people that you really should be doing this daily. Like, disrespect these
well,
people.
no, because they're going to be a fixed anti-humanist, won't they?
I
Like,
am, yeah, you might. Yeah, it's actually, yeah. Um,
so anyway, that's kind of my button on the whole esoteric thing. And the one little innovative point is to point out that there's five fives. There is a categorization of these five categories as five, right? Which really does mean that we've got 60 items to deal with, right? And that we've got five of five, if you want to think about it like that, right? Which again, like for ancients, they really took this shit very seriously.
oh yeah.
And the thing is that I asked people to kind of draw out on a piece of paper 5 stars out of the points of every star, but you'll notice that if you draw the star, there's a little pentagon in the middle of the star into which you could draw a star if you were very bored and in school or whatever, right? And this was also known by the ancients. Surprise, surprise, they knew how to draw shapes as well. Again, they
What?
weren't stupid, but and so there's this notion that you could have an infinite regress of
Right.
these stars within stars within stars, and this is exactly that as well, right? Like
Yeah.
this is not lost on them. So anyway, I will. Sorry. One last
Yeah.
point. Sorry, is that the Greeks had their five elemental system, right?
Yes. Five,
As one, and
which
there's the five platonic solids, all
five play,
right?
yeah, all those things. Which gets, I wrote five humors. So that
Mm-hmm.
was
Yep.
very early Christianized and remained uh
Yes.
part of Western. It was not seen as woo. This was medicine
This
in the
is
West.
just medicine, bro.
It was just
Like,
medicine. And so you get your humors out of whack and you get your five, which are connected to five elements and all this stuff. I mean, this was so thoroughly Christianized. Like, this is not, it is only since like maybe this late seven, maybe even the 1800s that we view that, like, hyper autist
mm-hmm.
evangelis view this as so sort of like you're doing magic. It's like, no, you're just doing medicine, and they didn't have the same, they didn't have a microscope. So they're like, okay, we're going to operate in a different way. And I mean, I'm not advocating for humoric theory in
mm-hmm.
medicine per se, but it's like these people, this is something when I've not taught Sir Gawain in class, but I've taught, various courses on the Middle Ages. And I always make sure, so you've already started saying this, which makes me very happy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I always make sure to get this across to whoever's listening, right? That people in the past weren't, well, there were stupid people, but it's not like everyone was dumb, and it's not like everyone's smart now, right? There were people, pattern recognition was a thing, and people could go, okay, so like if I get close to somebody who is sick, I'm more likely to get sick. Okay, well, so there must be something going on, right? So they create a thought model, they create a way of thinking about, whether in medicine, right, whether it's sort of the infectious quality of certain diseases, or whether even if it's not infectious, like my body, I feel sick, I feel bad, I'm out of whack. There's levels of maybe fluids, humors in my body that are out of whack. Okay, in modern science, you can cut open as many dead, bodies as you want to. You can desecrate as many graves as you want to, and go, ho ho ho, it's actually not that way. Okay, but like the idea is not flawed, right? Like the
I
idea
mean, those
that things,
people, those
like the
those
general
people who
idea, it
are
was it continues today. We have a more nuanced understanding of levels of everything in your body, but it's like the idea of health as being balance between things is still true. Like, that is
try to
still
tell
true.
those exact same people who are like, ha ha ha, dug up a dead body, doesn't matter. Try to convince them that race is fake, right? Try to get them to say any number of the bad words you're not allowed to say nowadays. Try to get them to, like, pick a side, like, against Russia, pro Russia. It's like, no, dude, like this shit is like human. I will agree with the books in one exact point, in that human social reality is a component of reality, right? Like it really is real. And so it's like, this humor theory and stuff was actually pretty deep in
It
the
is.
sense that it wasn't just, I'm not saying it was like technologically sophisticated. I'm saying it like had echoes across the rest of everything.
Yeah.
Um, in life. You would have been reminded about this. It would have been a way of
It was a way
adding
of,
meaning to the
well,
world
it
and
was a way of,
richness that. Oh, go
it was
ahead.
a,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry. It was a way of tying your own health to the tree
Yes.
of being that you existed in.
100%. Yes.
And
And that
health,
we do very awkwardly now. Like we have these sort of weird. So consider this: like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Huge. I'm a huge fan of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right. Thing is that all of these different models we have to understand ourselves in the universe are currently totally disconnected, and I find it very interesting that when I start connecting them together, people like their minds just blow directly out of their head. But I'm like, dude, this is how this shit is meant to be done,
yeah,
right? Like, and this is how it was done forever. And like we're actually just rediscovering a whole fuck ton of shit, or saying the same shit in like our current
yeah.
language.
We're
You see what I
translating
mean?
it. We're
Oftentimes,
translating
yeah,
it.
we're
Yeah.
translating it, but we don't recognize the chain of continuity because of the whole. And this didn't really mean for this to turn into an anti-scientist rant, but because the Enlightenment people like fucking pretend like they invented everything in the universe when like
Yeah.
bruh they didn't.
Well,
Like,
and I'll speak for me. I would say that I'm not anti-science. I am very anti-scientist
mm-hmm.
because of what
Yep.
humans do with science. It's like I mean, and we deify science, which was been very, we've said that multiple times on the show. Everyone knows this, but yeah, I mean, science is you got, Scientia and Deimos are cohabiting deities, and they are doing nasty things. They're nasty little guys, and they're doing nasty things. Um, Shout out to Carr. Um, One thing too, you brought up that if I can take the reins a
Yeah,
bit,
go ahead. Yeah, go
you
ahead.
brought
Go
up
ahead. Yeah,
Greeks
it's all
and
you.
humoric. I don't humoric probably theory. It's a word that we don't even use in modern English, so I've only seen it written. I don't really know how to say it.
Well,
Um,
it's humorous.
haha. Um, well, this is it made me think of, so, to do kind of a universal history kind of Pajot take. Where I'm a
Mm-hmm.
fanboy of his. I don't mind saying that. I enjoy
No,
his
Peugeot is dope.
immensely. I like him. He seems like a cool guy.
He's the
Um,
best part of Jordan Peterson right now.
he is the best part of Jordan Peterson. It you know, you I will say, just, some minor theological differences with the Orthodox aside. Um, just like if somebody's going into weird post-Christian land, just hand the reins to somebody from Orthodoxy and they'll just steer it right back in, because this is what they do
Mm-hmm.
for a living.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because you talked about sort of ancient Greek stuff, and we have interesting echoes in this story with Greek myth, particularly as it pertains to shields. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you say like Perseus, right? Like Perseus versus Medusa. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
a mirrored shield. So this is not a mirrored shield per se, but as we pointed out, a pentacle is designed to mirror evil back on itself. So
Oh,
it
which by the
is
way,
a
it's
kind
a
of mirror.
tangly bit. The pentacle is all tangly, kind of like the head of Medusa. I'm not saying they're the same thing. I'm just saying
Well,
like fun facts. You know what
yeah,
I
fun
mean? Like,
facts. Fun facts. So you have a magic shield is a thing, right? Magic weapons in general. If anyone here knows Looney Tunes, Spirit Magic Helmet with Spirit Magic Helmet. Do you know what I'm talking about? You ever seen? Yeah. What's Opera Doc? Highly recommend What's Opera Doc. Amazing. But so magical weapons. It's a thing found all around the world. Ever since you have weapons, you have magical ones. Right, you put the magic insignia on your weapon, you carve the runes in the weapon, or shield or whatever, armor, right? It energizes it somehow, it makes it special, it makes it sacred, as in set apart, it makes it can do,
it consecrates it.
consecrates it. Yep. And so yeah, this is essentially a mirrored shield, and it's interesting, and it's a doubly mirrored shield. It mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the pentacle on the outside, so it, like, as an initial, don't fuck with me, not today, Satan, kind of vibe happening. And then on the inside, it's got the face of Virgin Mother, which, the poem explicitly says, oh, is to like remind Gawain about virtues and all these good things, which it totally is. But I also think it's like that's also part of the the woo. It's part of the woo, right? It's like it's got the
Hmm.
face of
Hmm.
the Virgin Mother on the inside, and so it's double. It's two-sided coin, like almost literally. I mean, it's probably some sort of in the 1300s. It probably would not be a round shield. Those types. It would be some sort of later shield design that you would imagine it to be, but you get a magical shield, and so like in the Greek myth, who gives Perseus the mirrored shield?
Oh, wasn't it one of the sis
It's
Athena?
Athena.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Athena.
Yep,
So
yep.
Athena, who is a divine feminine figure, is giving him the magic shield, right, to defeat the nasty mom to defeat the dark
The
mother.
nasty little moms.
The nasty little mom. Got to defeat the dark mother inside us all. Yeah. And here you have, I mean, it's essentially kind of like no, it's like Mary is not appearing and saying, "Here you go," right? Thanks. But essentially she's there with him constantly, right? Like on the inside of his shield. And so it was interesting. This is a similar kind of idea playing itself out here in an explicitly Christian sense, which I thought was really neat. And I
No,
kind
it
of
is really neat.
didn't pick up on that the first time I read it because I think I was just, the first time you read it, like I'm going to get the broad, I'm just going to sit back and experience the story. Second, third, fourth time, then you can go with a hyper autist route, like we're doing here. Like, now, what does this mean? What does this mean? But it's interesting, right? Because I think this is really kind of the Pajot's idea of a universal history, at least from speaking for myself, right? Like that if the story of Christ is real, if you believe that, if you really believe that, then it is present everywhere. At least it potentially could be everywhere. And that's so like it's this is an explicitly Christian poem, but it's riffing on ideas. And I'm not saying that the poet necessarily knew. I think it's hard to say. Maybe he knew. Maybe he had heard the story. Uh, I don't know. But regardless, it kind of almost doesn't even matter, right? Because if you're dipping
He
in,
was certainly meme possessed, that's for sure.
what's that?
He was certainly meme possessed,
Is
M-E-M-E
meme possessed, which
possessed.
is to say logos possessed, right? And if you're
Hmm. Hmm.
inhabiting in that sphere, I mean, this is like, okay, we can see that throughout time, there's been this concept of divine feminine favor helping a warrior kill or kill something bad or do something courageous, do something virtuous, whatever that would be. And so that was, I know that's just like a little thing that popped up, but it was is interesting. It was
No,
interesting.
I think it's extremely relevant though, because when you see the
Well,
shield,
also,
right? The
sorry,
shield.
also think about the time that this story is set in. Christmas time,
Mm,
the incarnation. So,
mm,
right, it's
mm.
obviously Mary is always important for Catholics, and this is also written during the Catholic period. This is pre-Reformation, so it's very very Catholic. But it's like also the time of year. It's like this is a time where we particularly think of Mary, right? We particularly think of these kinds of her role in sort of salvation history. Um, so it's I guess I'm fanboying here, but I'm just saying it's neat. It's cool. Like there's a lot
No,
going on
it's totally neat.
just with this freaking shield.
No, well, so this is the thought too, right? So the shield here, right, is you can think so they put on all the armor, right? And so this is the internal, the external, right? And the shield, um, in my mind, is sort of it can be thought of as the barrier between your self-observing mind, right, and the senses, right? I mean, the outside of the shield includes literally the five senses, right? So we're talking about like protection from without, but also protection from within, right?
Right.
So the facing out part of the shield is all of the things that protect you from the external world, your senses, your virtues, joy, all those things, right? Your hands, your finger. Although I feel like there's something deeper with the fingers, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, regardless, point being is that, and then Mary, the Mother Mary, right, is the thing protecting you from within, which from a Catholic perspective is like you're doing the rosary,
Right.
you're calling on her for protection and all that shit. Like, she's the nurturing mother that's got the home game totally on lock, right? And so he's looking
Well
at
said.
he sees her, right, and is once again reinvigorated, right? Like she's literally in his mind, which is everything towards him after the shield. You see what I mean? So this is my thoughts.
Well, she's also she's also, I mean, yeah, yes. I mean, all of those things. Yes, yes to all of those things.
So anyway, we're 2 lines into the pod.
Yeah, we're two lines. Yeah, exactly. Well, but this is a sign of a great work that you can do this, and you don't even have to be autistic kids to do this. You can be normie and do this, and you hopefully you are normie. The world cannot exist just with autists, but this
Well,
is
I think most
incredibly dense
readers
stuff.
would have just been. I think most readers at that time, especially if you're
Well,
educated enough to
readers,
like be reading this,
Elliot,
right?
Elliot, my brother in Christ, few people would have read this. People would have probably been more likely to hear it.
No, no, for sure, for sure. So certainly everybody who is literally reading it, right,
Yeah,
would have found all of this immediately obvious. This would have been essentially like, so for us, we spent an hour out, unpacking, which I fucking hate, but
it's a
unpacking all
teacher
of the
word. Yeah,
symbology. Well, I think about it as like a woke word, but fair
it
enough,
is a woke
teacher
word.
word.
But you know what? In the
Unzipping.
spirit of the season, we're taking it back.
We're taking it back. We're taking it. So unpacking all of these. It takes us an hour to think through all this shit. But I think at that time, with the folk knowledge, I
Yeah.
think this would have been immediately obvious to literally every Tom, Dick, and Harry,
Yes.
right? What this is supposed to mean. So these two like words are actually meant to save everybody just piles and piles of time and really clarify, nah, this guy is a very, very good guy. I've done all the things to clarify that he's a good guy. He just fucked up once, and now he has got to deal with the consequences,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Well,
you know.
if I may also, as somebody who we run a small channel here, we appreciate all you wonderful people who follow and watch. Um, if I may reference another, YouTuber who's far more
Mhm.
accomplished than I am, but also a PhD, Jackson Crawford. Everyone should check out his channel. He does a lot of stuff with Old Norse and Old Germanic, but like Northern Europe kind of stuff, particularly Old Norse stuff. Very accomplished guy, very smart. Um, he talks about tropes, and so it's a bit of an aside, but I think this will connect to what you're talking about, Elliot. I
Mhm.
forget which video it was in, otherwise I would link to it. Apologies. I know he said this on his show. Um, that when he teaches either in videos or sometimes in person about saga literature, so Icelandic family sagas, but Viking Age and later, medieval Iceland particularly, there's all these kind of tropes, right, that like the saga authors will just throw out there, and if you are a modern person reading it, you're like, I don't know what this is. I think
Mhm.
and so what he says is like, okay, so these tropes, which in the case of Gawain, these are tropes, right? Um, would have been instantly recognizable to the modern audience. And so the way Jackson Crawford has described this, which I've cited my source and I'm also going to use it right now, um, is that, like if you're a modern American, like a general American, right? You can walk in or you can start telling a story. And if you go, everyone knows that's Darth Vader. You don't have to explain
Mhm.
that that's Darth Vader. Why? Because it exists in the storytelling consciousness of us as a, whether Americans are people or not is a big question, but in America at least, that's a storytelling motif. It's a trope that is Darth Vader.
New
So
hot take here: Americans are not people.
yeah, I don't know if we are, but there are conventions in our storytelling, right?
Yes,
Which would maybe be
yes.
an argument in favor that we are a people. I don't really know, but the point that Crawford's point is that is like that medieval authors do sort of the asterisk Darth Vader voice all the time, and if you don't, and in order to unpack it, it takes like literal hours of explanation because you have to understand like that there's a lot of assumed knowledge, right? For their contemporary readers. One of the challenges, but one of the great joys, I think, and that's what we're doing right now, of reading texts, stories, poems, whatever, from a period that's not now, is that you get to understand, you learn about the worldview. You're like, oh, all this stuff was just sort of assumed knowledge, and all they had to do is say, hey, 5 point star, hey, Mary, yes, move on, right?
Mhm.
Like it's just
Mhm.
there. And so it's kind of the equivalent of like Darth Vader voice. Oh, he must be the bad guy, you know? Like you could, if you were to if you were to time travel Bill and Ted style back to talk to the Gawain poet and make a noise like, he'd be like, what? I don't what is that, right? What is that? Like it makes no sense to him, right? Because that's not a storytelling or convention. It's not a piece of cultural or religious imagery that he would be, it's just it's a the past is a foreign country, as they say. Anyhow, an aside of an aside, but it's an interesting point, right? Um, for contemporary audiences, this is not a none of these things are stretches. For us, they are, right? And that's why you need autists to explain it or over explain it, as the case may be.
So,
Um,
yep.
it's our Christmas gift to you. So yeah, I mean, I highly recommend people read the poem. It's very good. We haven't even got, I mean, this is just two stanzas of the poem, but it is very woo. There's a lot of stuff happening here. It is a very beautiful synthesis of sort of the pre-Christian and Christian, I guess you could say, in many respects. And so I that's why Elliott, I wanted to have you on. Anything, final points, stuff to take us home? Anything you can think of?
No, just don't be afraid of pentacles, right? Like they're your friend. They're not there to hurt you.
I
The
would say
Hegelians.
depends on how people are using them, right? As yeah, I mean, are they
I mean,
symbolizing virtues and joys, or are they symbolizing control over forces, right? I would say that's
are
my
you a demon?
I would I would do a very much of a Tolkien take on this, and say, this is a mental technology, as all symbols are.
Hmm.
Right? All
Hmm.
symbols are mental
Yes, yes,
technologies. What are you using them for, right? Are you using them to
exactly. Yep.
control? If you're using them to control, you are doing a Saruman, right? You are using them to
Hmm.
bend.
Hmm.
That is a Saruman,
Hmm.
and ultimately a Sauron, and ultimately a Morgoth kind of move. Um, or are you using them to seek after the true good beautiful, to uphold the true good beautiful? And I do think that that's what Gawain is doing here. So that's more of a Gandalf,
Hmm.
right? Like he's doing a Gandalf take on that. So
And so therefore, the last kind of point, I guess, is that he is literally the Knight of Pentacles, which, if you're a
yeah,
Kabbalist, is worth really meditating on. Like this is literally a story, a major Arcana story type, right? Of the, or maybe even a minor Arcana story type of the Knight of Pentacles going on a kind of minor journey. This would be very easy to read in terms of tarot.
yeah,
Obviously it's a superimposition of it, but the
right.
tarot stuff was based
Tarot
off of this, right?
tarot is based up. Tarot comes much later, but yes, it's referencing things like this. Yeah.
Explicitly too, right? Like, I mean, a lot of the tarot cards are like literally like, oh yeah, this is from these epics and stuff, right?
So an aside of an aside of an aside, but I'm curious, and I think other people may be as well. So
Mm-hmm.
this could well be a topic for another day, which is fine. People want to
Mm-hmm.
get on with their Christmas feasting, I'm assuming, but uh, Knight of Pentacles, what connotations does that card have? Because I'm curious if there's an explicit, how much there's an explicit connection to the Gawain story. That's
Yeah,
something.
sure. I mean, aside from him being all sorts of pentacles all the time, right? Like
Yeah.
the Knight of Pentacles. So think about just like the normal playing cards, right? You got Jack, King, Queen. Well, and then underneath underneath the Jack, which is the Knight, would have been the Page, right? So the four kind of quote unquote court cards, or of the tarot deck, is that there's four suits, right? Wands, which is associated with fire and spirit, right? Cups, which is
Expelliarmus.
associated with waters, and
Sorry.
think more like staff, like wizard staff, more like
Okay,
you
I
shall
couldn't
not
help myself.
pass. No, nope, you got it. The cups, which is water and emotions, right? You've got swords, which is air and thought, right? And then finally pentacles, which is earth and material reality, the body, your physical body, stuff like that, right? Okay, so to that end, right? The king, queen, knight, and page all take their own Greek element within their own elemental system. So the king it represents fire, the queen is water, the knight is air, and the page is earth. Right. So you would say like the King of Cups, right, is the fire of water, right, the spirit of emotion or whatever, right. So the Knight of Pentacles is the air of earth, right? So the thought form of material reality, right? Like the thinking of your, so maybe a brain, like literally the Knight of Pentacles could be thought of the actual brain, not like the concept of the brain, but like the brain itself, right? Or the mind itself. Although the mind is a little bit too amaterial, right?
You
Like
mean
the
like
actual,
the organ of the brain,
yeah, literally the organ of the brain,
gray
or
matter,
however,
which has the word matter in it.
your brain matter, right? 100%. So this is like, you know, maybe the Knight of Pentacles could be thought of like training your brain to do something better, right? So your brain is going on a journey to learn how to think better, right? Which maybe that's a story. I don't know. I didn't read all of it. You see what I mean? But essentially, it like the Knight of Pentacles going on a journey would be about you learning in material reality,
Well,
perhaps, right? Are you
and that's
thinking through material
and
reality?
that's actually fits very much for the poem. So there was no huge spoilers, I think, for the poem there. Actually, we set it up a little bit. I recommend everyone read it. It's not super long. There's many
Mm.
good actually Tony Walker did a free audiobook reading of it on here on YouTube. I'll link to that in the description. Highly recommend. Great reader from Yorkshire, got a beautiful Yorkshire accent. He's a cool guy. It's like 2.5 hours long, depending on the speed. Like, some people read quicker than others. You might get different readings that are a little bit faster or slower. Also, the translation might change, right? The length of a little bit. I recommend it. It's great for Christmas time.
Yeah, and it's a little bit it's you get a little bit of Beowulf energy while it's significantly more relatable to us than Beowulf is,
Yeah,
right? Because
and
it's
it's right in the middle.
not just random Norse longhousemen, right?
It's right in the middle. It straddles the worlds of today and Beowulf pretty nicely, actually, even
Well,
chronologically.
we'll have to figure out. Well, we already kind of did T.S. Eliot, right? But some sort of maybe the last of the epic poetry of well, whatever is the appropriate time period. Maybe like the Renaissance or whatever.
Maybe, yeah,
Um,
you could say that it also straddles maybe like Beowulf and Shakespeare and Marlowe and that
oh
kind
yeah,
of,
Shakespeare,
or
sure.
Milton for that, Matt, like those early
Oh,
modern
let's do
dudes.
Milton instead. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, Milton
Milton
is the right one.
or John Donne, another good choice. Yeah.
Well, because we were thinking about doing what's his nuts, Milton's Paradise Lost, I think, or was
In
there
the new
another
year, I'd
one
love to
that
do
you
some
wanted?
Paradise Lost, sir. I would love to do some Paradise Lost.
Yeah, yeah,
The Paradise Lost, as a little bit of a teaser, has demons speak of democracy in that poem, so it's very interesting.
yeah. Demons are democratic, right?
Yep,
I don't know.
very
Doesn't really fit
democratic.
anyway.
Yep,
Yeah,
cool. Well,
democratic.
democratic. Uh, Merry Christmas to everyone. Have a happy new year. All those things. We'll see you in the new year. I will continue to harangue Elliott back on the show when we can get him. Me and Mitch will continue to do breakdowns of movies and such, and books, or movies on my channel, books and Supreme Court cases over on his channel, Doublethink Media. I'll link to all those things. Please check that out. And yeah, have a wonderful, wonderful time. Try do again. I'll say it, do something nice for other people, do something nice for yourself, and remember that remember why we celebrate this time. It is about this incarnational being in the world, and that's what it's all about. Elliot, take it easy. I'll see you in the new year. Sounds good.
See ya.
Cool. All right. Peace, everyone.